Miss Jessica HODLr, thank you so much for joining me here today and being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, ma'am.
No, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I always joke with everybody. It's obviously the NPCs. There's a lot of people in the world not thinking, not critically thinking. I know some of your background, just growing up homeschooling. It's something that we are dealing with now. Is just telling you about our little ones backstage and just going through the rigmarole of school and compulsory school versus homeschooling. I think it's such an important debate to have. And the one thing I wanted to start with though is a couple years ago, you came onto my radar a couple years ago, and our stories are somewhat similar in the sense that we found Bitcoin Twitter a few years ago. Same with me. I was in the traditional fiat world doing real estate and didn't know about Bitcoin Twitter. And I was like, oh, these people do exist. Like these people that think like me. So our stories are very similar. I've seen you talk about that before. I was just laughing. But you had said something to the effect of, I can't marry a man, or I could never be with a man who decided to get injected, to get the jab. And because I know he can't make the decisions I need for my family. That was one of the funniest tweets I've ever seen in my life, still to this day. And that was like my first time I think I ever saw you on Twitter. I was like, let's go. So I would love for you. I'd love to dive into stuff like this here in this pod. But again, what kind of made you the way you are, and to go out, and most people, even if they think those things, they won't say them. So what makes Jessica Jessica?
Totally. So, I mean, to not go too far back, but I was homeschooled from the age of 9 to 14. And it was probably one of the best decisions my parents ever made because it really allowed me to really just focus on what I liked to do. I was really only in like the traditional learning for like 2 or 3 hours a day. And then after that, I was able to do whatever I want. So I did competitive figure skating. I was a part of a club called 4-H where I learned how to take care of chickens or goats or how to cook or how to do public speaking. So it really just enabled me to like stretch out my wings in whatever I wanted to learn, and I wasn't stuck in a classroom for 8 hours every day, and it was truly incredible. I was always very self disciplined, even when I was younger, so I was able to do schoolwork on my own, and then do everything else afterwards. So it was pretty amazing. And then I went to high school, did pre engineering, and then went to college for industrial engineering. And then when I came out of college, I was like, I do not want to go into work in the traditional sense. Then COVID happened, and basically, I was like, what is all these people just bending the knee, just going with whatever the top head said? If you can't go out, you can't go to restaurants, you can't hang out with your friends or family, Christmas is canceled. And I just thought that was absolutely wild. And basically, it was just my family and I going at it, being like, are we the only ones that think this is just absolutely nonsense? And my mom was listening to Max Kaiser at the time, and he was talking about Bitcoin Twitter. And my mom is like, all these people are on Twitter. You need to get on Twitter. You need to find like minded people. And at the time, I thought Twitter was like the dumbest thing ever. And I was like, all right, fine. I'll make an account and see what sticks. And I basically just started tweeting out what I thought and what was important to me and about Bitcoin. And I found Bitcoin Twitter, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it was like a couple months before Bitcoin 2021 in Miami, and I was in South Florida. So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
so I made some connections, went to the conference, and met the most amazing people. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that's where Katie and I met, and we realized how much we had in common. And that's when she was like, do you want to work together? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And
Cool.
that's when I started with Plan B Passport. But mainly it was just Twitter was just the main outlet for me to just get all my thoughts and ideas out there, and ended up finding people who thought the same way.
Boy, it makes me think of many questions. One of them being that was my first foray into just conferences themselves a couple years ago. Like we were kind of talking offline, and that was really eye opening to me. And just like every person you met was just like you had known them for like ever, right? Like it was just like the most mind blowing thing ever. Why was your mom so based? Like why how was your mom so based? That's what I want to. So I was watching some other things you had talked about before in other interviews, and you again hear your mom again. Like how is she so based?
So she just loves learning. Like is always reading, always online, like trying to educate herself. And she found Alex Jones like probably 14 years ago now. And like she like I remember we would be driving around and she would be listening to the Christian radio, and they would say things like in 10-15 years they're going to start talking about like trans and
Mm-hmm.
getting kids to change their gender. And they were right.
Yeah.
So really it was mainly like she's so based just because she just would educate herself all of the time and just listening to the right people.
Was she a product of homeschooling or the traditional compulsory schools? Like what was her
No,
upbringing?
no. She went to public school, went to college,
Wow.
and I'm pretty sure she came across homeschooling probably from one of the Christian radios. And at first, it was like, can I really teach my kids? And she ended up finding a really good program. I'm pretty sure it's still around. It's called Ace Pace, and it basically had all the subjects, and they divide it up into like little booklets that you can finish on either a weekly or a bi-monthly basis. And it was awesome. I mean, I loved it. It made learning so fun and easy and not like a chore at all.
Interesting. Okay, good to
Yeah.
note. Good to note.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, that's man. You yeah, definitely very blessed. That's for sure. With your mother like that.
Absolutely.
That's
Oh
there's no
yeah.
doubt about that. What was like the moment that you had, I guess, over the last few years? Because again, you're already because my father was a very similar way. Like so, I was very blessed in that regard too. Where my father from I'm 37 years old, so like in the 90s, I remember as a young kid, my dad would be yelling at the TV like, they're lying to you. Like they just lied to you. Like what they just contradicted themselves. That anchor said this, and then the reporter said that, and so it was always like something ingrained in me where like I was always questioning everything. So going through this maturation process and learning, and what was like the aha moments for you over the last handful of years? Because I have a couple. Because I was leaving college in the crash from Michigan State, 08, 09, and seeing Obamacare ram down everyone's throats, seeing the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, and how they were really the same thing, but the media pitted against each other or pitted you against each other, and then seeing Obama get reelected. It's not about the person himself, but hey, all these things happen, and then we're reelecting that same guy when there was really no energy for him. Ironically, similar to this election coming up again, there's no energy for this guy. The huge crowds were with Romney, who was not a great candidate either, and but the guy got elected still or reelected. And so there's some of these like really like threshold moments then 2020 obviously as well, where I was like, wow, the history books, we're going down that path. Like we're the empire crumbling. What were some of the aha moments for you over the last handful of years that you were just like, whoa, we've passed the event horizon. There's no coming back for this. Like we gotta, the plan B. Like we're really starting to diversify and decentralize. What were those moments for you?
So I totally lost you after like um that they're trying to reelect and there's no energy, and
Okay.
then I lost
Good. Thank you. So yeah, I was saying, what were these? The event horizon. Like we crossed the Rubicon. We've crossed the event horizon where there's no energy for Obama, but yet he's reelected. And then 2020 comes along, and they're welding people in their homes, welding their door shut, and people are just taking it. And so I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, the history books, I'm reading the history books from everything I've ever read in my life. Like this is actually happening here in America. And I always held out hope that wouldn't happen in America. what were those moments for you, those inflection points where you were just like, holy cow, like this is actually happening, and it led you down this path of what Bitcoin or finding Katie, right, and plan B, and like really decentralizing your life? What were those inflection points for you?
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist. Available now.
Yeah, so what happened was I was in college and my mom heard about Bitcoin on Alex Jones's show, and I came back for either Thanksgiving break or Christmas break, and she was like, there's this freedom money called Bitcoin, and she's like, and it's gonna save us essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty much when I learned, like, the money in the bank isn't actually your money. You don't have total control over it. That's when I learned, like, how many middlemen there are in terms of handling money, transactioning money, and that you really don't have full control over what's yours. And so that's when I really started to learn about how the world works, even more so because when I was homeschooled, like, I learned, you know, financial systems and
Mm-hmm.
money, but not really down to all the education that we have now with, like, all the people talking about how amazing Bitcoin is, sailors program, safety, the Bitcoin standard, like all these real education that we have on how money should actually work. And no, then I really saw that Bitcoin was, the solution to actually being able to have control and sole custody of what's yours.
why why do you think it's so hard for people to grasp these things and like see like these inflection points like we're talking about, and like you're talking about right now? Like why does the average person just kind of put their head in the sand, I guess, take the blue pill and put their head in the
Yeah.
sand? Like why? Because I can't grapple. I don't know, Jessica. Like, and I've been, this is something for 20 years since I was a kid. I could not understand. It was like, all you got to do is pick up a history book. This is not
Yep.
hard, guys. This is very, this is seemingly not hard for like me or for you or for many Bitcoiners to like pick up. But why is it like 98% of society is just kind of like la di da, whatever. Um, do you have any please help me here. Like, do you have any inkling as to why? Oh
I
boy.
think I think it's just because ignorance is bliss, and it's easier to just go along with what everybody else is saying and thinking, and it's a lot harder to, you know go against what everybody is saying and come out as like the crazy one. And people don't like change. They don't like to be the front runner until
Mhm.
everybody else has kind of accepted it and been like, okay, yeah, like, that'll work. I mean, that's why you have so many people that don't, um that they're not, the front runners and the changer, the people who implement change. And it's the minority, that's for sure. Like, I know from past experiences where I've, tried to explain to people, different situations in terms, whether it's, social, political, um all that stuff, and they're like, oh, no, 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 we can't talk about that, we no, 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 like, that's not right. And I'm like, and I'm just kind of in the position where, no, you're wrong, but you'll just realize it later. So
I, it just like it's astounding to me though, really, like
yeah.
where people just believe government. And I've had many people tell me this over the years, whether it was like, close family members, really close family members, many family members or friends were like, I used to think you were crazy. And, like, I just believe that like people had the best intentions for us. And I was like, well, yeah, I think most humans do. Like, I really believe that. However, the few that don't, they're in the government, and like the government always throughout history has been that centralizing force. They're always trying to take power, whether it's, bad people or not, it's just kind of like the collective nature of government, and everyone can like Spider-Man meme and like pass blame. It like forces you to do dumber and dumber things over time just naturally. And that to
Oh
me
yeah.
is like, yeah, it's just like this weird, like if you believe government, then you have to accept all these lies. Like currency is actually money, like the dollar is money, and your retirement will be there when you get there. And if you just jab yourself with this experimental thing, then you're going to be fine. Or put your money in a bank, put your wealth in a bank. I mean, it's like you send your kids to the government run schools, and like you have to accept all these like wild things. And to your point, I think it's like you said, people want to put their heads in the sand and then tell themselves these stories, when in reality it's just 3%. It's just a couple of percent of people that need to stand up and say, hey, whoa, 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 we're not going this way. And then things really, really change. And these are things that if people don't follow you, they should. These are things you talk about all the time on Twitter. Like, did you just know, like a few years ago, could you ever imagine that you'd have so many people like reading what you're as a, someone studying engineering? Like, do you imagine like people coming to you and like, hey, what did Jessica say? Or resonating with what you're espousing when you were like a couple years ago, you and your family, like, are we going crazy? Does anyone else think like this? Like, what is that? That's got to be a crazy, like last couple of years of just like a evolution and maturity right there.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was neither my expectation nor what I thought would ever happen. Like, that's not why I went onto Twitter at all. But what really, I guess, exploded my reach was last year. I was like, how am I going to find the man that I want to spend the rest of my life with? And like, first of all, in South Florida, where the pickings are kind of slim. And it was basically just Katie and I in her
Oh
kitchen
man.
talking about, okay, I'm just going to put out there what I wanted and kind of my rationale of why I wanted someone who didn't get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lot of pushback because a lot of people were like, "Well, what about the people that were forced to take it?" And like one guy said to me, "Well, what about the guys who couldn't get their pensions if if they didn't get the jab?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, they're older, so I probably wouldn't be marrying them." But people really didn't realize or grasp how important it is to stand up to these ridiculous, not just requests, but these requirements in order to just go to a restaurant and participate in society. And I think it really took people aback that I was saying these things because they really thought they had no choice when they actually did. Like, they could have said no. And I feel like if a lot more people said no, that it really could have changed the course. And I mean, obviously, a lot of people regret taking it. They just
Mm-hmm.
won't say
Right.
it because then, it creates this tangle in their mind of like, oh my gosh, I didn't do it when I should have stood up against it. And I feel like it really um it's difficult for a lot of people to accept. But basically, I was saying all these things, and one of the biggest ones was I tweeted out a video of these children running through like this pride parade in their school, and I was saying don't send your kids to school, and it really wrecked people's day. I had people in my comments saying like, "Oh, the FBI needs to come get this girl." Like, there was
Wow.
this one dude who was like, "Oh, she might be the next mass shooter. We need to
What?
we need to arrest her." Oh yeah, no, it was crazy. I had to go private. I had to get off of Twitter for like a little bit. But basically,
Wow.
my now fiance found me because I was tweeting those things. So I mean,
Well,
I'm
there you go.
happy I
Yeah.
did, obviously.
Well,
So
it's a law of attraction in that way, right? I mean, like you put out into the world, you give and you shall receive. You put out what you want and it comes back to you, right? That's amazing.
yep,
That is too cool that you wow. Wow. Well, again, like
yeah,
that's my story with connecting with you, and like my first vision of you, I guess, is that one of that tweet basically. So yeah, it's I guess game recognizes game in that sense, and not in a confident or cocky, or not a cocky way, but more of a confidence way of just like, hey, I know what I want. So that is, yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
it, the thing, I don't know how faith-based you are necessarily, but I am personally, and I think about the
Mhm.
saints a lot, and really basically all of them are laying down their life and picking up their cross. In another way of saying it is just total humility to a greater cause, obviously, of, hey, I might not get to travel this month, oh, I didn't get the jab, so I might not be able to travel for a year or two. And you saw so many people just like, well, I can't do it, I want to do what I want to do. And it's like, I just keep coming back to the last couple of years. The thought that keeps coming back in my head is, just increasing humility and lowering ego. And it's tough for men. And it's just something you're constantly trying to work on, of just increase humility. But I think part of it too, and you just kind of said something along these lines, which is being able to hold opposing opinions in your head at the same time, which is, I believe, a form of genius, where even if my kids went to a public school and they don't, but I could still, I think the society has a really hard time, and correct me if I'm wrong if you see this differently, but I feel like people still have a really hard time where they get so emotional. I'm like, well, my kids go to a public school, like they're okay, like how can you dare say that? And it's like, well, that might be the situation you're in right now, but it still might be the wrong thing to do. And there's two opposing opinions, or things in your head at the same time. Is that kind of how you see at least genius in a way too? But being able to, I think awareness and just knowing that is half the battle to then getting to where you need to be eventually. Does that, hopefully that makes sense, or, you align with
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Oh no, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Basically, it's like you have to just weather the storm and just get through it. And then, I mean, you truly end up better on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
because now we're seeing all of these side effects and repercussions of
Yeah.
getting something that was just bulldozed through everything that it's normally supposed to go through, and now people are suffering the consequences of basically just laying down and just accepting. Because I knew people that were like, I don't care if I grow a tail from getting this. I just want to go out to eat. And I'm like, do you really care that much
Wild.
about going out to eat?
Oh
It's
boy.
just, it's insane how they validate their actions from, just not caring about standing up against what they actually believe in. And at the end of the day, it really is that. It's just completely throwing your principles out the
Mm-hmm.
window and just laying down and accepting whatever they throw at you. And I guess that's what a consequence is of just trusting government and trusting whatever you hear from the TV, from the internet, from the people that you're supposed to trust. And it's really sad to see, I mean,
It
at the end
is.
of the day, because people just have no backbone anymore, and they aren't willing to educate themselves. And we all know history repeats itself, and they just aren't willing to stick to their values. Did you lose me? Are you there?
Yeah, it's wild. I think of, I don't know where this was. It was a quote. Boy, oh boy, I don't know where. For a while, I've been trying to think of where I saw this or heard this, but it was this guy basically saying, like, do you, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, do you have more in common with your neighbor? Like here in America, for instance, do you have more in common with the guy you live next door to, or maybe someone that holds these principles? Like, is it do you have more in common with a Bitcoiner in Kenya or Nigeria? Or are you more in common, more aligned with these at least American principles, like in a way, like the Constitution of freedom, liberty, justice for all, than just your neighbor, just because they live inside the walls of that place? And it really is illuminating, like you said, in the last couple of years, like someone like that, like they're getting jabbed just because they want to go to the restaurant. I mean, to me, that's not American. I mean, I don't know. We can fight all day about that, but that's not what all of our ancestors came over here for. I mean, it's just, we're in such like this weird world right now where we're more aligned with, yeah, like a lot of Bitcoiners around the world than we are our neighbors next door here in the United States. And I think that's something that's really profound in saying all this. What are your thoughts obviously right now we're going through this, the Fauci stuff. He's been, testifying, like all these things going on. I mean, what are your feelings right now, just seeing all this happen? I mean, I'm vindication, I guess, comes across the mind, I guess, a little bit. But like, what are your thoughts in seeing all these things? Are you getting people coming to you, talking to you about it? Whatever. Like, what is Jessica's world right now, this last week or two, as these things are these revelations are coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the founding fathers would be rolling in their grave. But
Yeah.
I think it really just depends on where you're at, because like when I go to Austin, for example, I'm surrounded by like-minded people and
Mhm.
people who value the same things. They
Mhm.
um are principled. They, will stand up for what they believe in. And I feel like the majority of people are like that, but I don't feel like the majority are kind of as loud as I am. But truly, I think it depends on where you are, because I feel like if you talk to someone one on one about your feelings and beliefs, they do see eye to eye with you. But if you put them in a room with, say, 9 out of 10 people that just go with the flow and repeat what they hear on the TV, they're not willing to kind of be the one that says no, like, you're wrong. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what this country was basically founded upon, which is freedoms for the individual, freedom of speech, and I feel really it just depends on where you are, and if you want to be around people who are like-minded, who value freedom, who stand up for what they believe in. I truly feel like it's um what's the word I'm looking for? It's indescribable how valuable it is to be surrounded by like-minded people, and it's really priceless, because once you have that community around you, it's you can't go wrong with it, truly.
Yeah, I love that you say that. It's, community. I talk about this a lot. It's because it's, again, really unknown, I guess, just overall, is the number one thing in the survival situation. Community. It's not gold, it's not food, it's not water, it's not Bitcoin, it's not any of those things. It's, hey, who's around me that can help me with the thing I'm lacking at that moment. So it's just so incredibly important. Not to mention, like you kind of touched on, I mean, it's like it's your support system just in general. It's you become the people you hang around, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's just, boy, is it so important. And none of us talk about it enough, in a way. Though I will say you and Katie do talk about it a fair amount. Katie, there was one time Katie like snapped back at me like on Twitter because I said something, but like it was like halfway to what Katie wanted to say, type of thing. She's like, no, it's because of this and this. And I was like, no, like I'm on your team. Like I just was only like, I was talking about this thing over here. I was like, please don't hurt me. I was like, but it was about the community though. It was like I loved it because it was, yeah. Oh, you know what it was though? This was what it was actually. Now I remember when I was growing up playing hockey, we were playing AAA hockey here in Michigan, and we'd be traveling all over the place. And some of the parents had older kids that had been through the ringer, kind of been down that path already. And one of them was telling my parents like, hey, the biggest thing, like the biggest problem you're going to have as you progress here with your kids, as I was the oldest, is other parents. So it's not like you're going to have problems with other kids necessarily. You're going to have problems with other parents and how they parent or lack of parenting and things like that. And so it was just like a kind of a one-off comment because she had said something or whatever. And then I was saying like, here, this is what I'd heard too and just been told. And you're going to run into it regardless of where you're at. She's like, well, I make sure that doesn't happen because I build a community intentionally around me. I was like, no, I do too. That's the point. Oh, man. Anyway, so
So
that's such a,
funny.
yeah, it's such an important thing. Speaking of Katie though, so there's some other stuff we can get to in a tiny bit here, but about family and all that. But speaking of Katie, give us the quick, you've talked about this many times, but how Plan B kind of came into existence, and you can touch on that if you would like, and give us the spiel or the elevator pitch, I guess, on what you guys do, and then my thought is, I'm, like I'm an American. I never want to leave here. So for someone like me who's, got the Neanderthal brain, please explain, again, what you guys do and why it is important for someone, again, here in America or anywhere around the world to, speak to you guys or, know what it is you guys provide.
Yeah, so basically we sell passports. That's like the three-word shortness of what we do. But basically we work with jurisdictions that offer citizenship through investment, meaning that you can either donate money to the government or purchase real estate, and on this basis they give you a passport. Um, Me personally, I love the US. I think it's the best country in the world, and I would never want to leave. But the main reason Americans get a second passport is basically just as an insurance policy against the government, where if things were to go really haywire, that they have a way out. Because as we saw with Canada, Australia, and a bunch of other countries a couple of years ago, they said you can't leave, and they basically, imprisoned you in the
Yeah.
country. But if you had a second passport, you would be able to leave. So it really enables a foolproof way of getting out if you ever needed to.
Do you have to, because I know there's every country is so different. Is that something where I was always under the impression that the US was, like, oh, you can't, whatever, have a second one. You got to renounce your citizenship. How is the US when it comes to all that?
Oh yeah, no, you could have 7 passports if you wanted to. The main thing with the US is that you are always taxed no matter where you are. So they're one of 2 countries in the entire world that have citizenship based taxation, meaning that no matter where you are, you always have to file back in the US.
Did the US just implement that in the last few years? Like, because that wasn't always the case, was it?
Um I don't believe they just implemented it, but I
Okay.
know that the renunciation numbers have been increasing pretty exponentially over the past
Wow.
couple of years. But the majority still they don't renounce because
It is.
obviously it's a strong passport.
Yeah. It is scary though, because again, like I'm similar to you. Like I was a kid that wanted to be a Navy SEAL or a fighter pilot my entire life, and I ended up playing hockey. I played for the U.S. national team for a few years, so like that was my thing, that I was gunning for that, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I've worn the flag on my chest, and it was a massive, like probably one of the biggest goals of my life. Excuse me. I look back now, knowing what I know now, as I was 16, 17, 18 years old when I was playing for the under 18 teams. And, it was just like, wow, like, I don't know if I look at America the same way anymore. And I do, I like the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the thought of America, the experiment, that's what I have reverence for still. But everything else, you're just like, you're so just like, wow, like what is going on? You feel disenfranchised. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic I guess we go down. But how do you guys, the other thing I was thinking of is, how do you differ from like nomad capitalist? Was it, I think it's Andrew Henderson that does that. How do you guys differ or similar to that, I guess?
Yeah, so our, I guess, biggest highlight is that we know how to use Bitcoin as a way of showing the islands that this is actually money and it's real. So so we've
Trying
actually
to detail.
that's our biggest highlight is we do that for Bitcoiners, so we know how to explain it to the islands.
Interesting. Very
Yeah.
cool. And that's the other thing I was thinking of too, is again, the brain drain. Like you said, people renouncing their citizenships and people leaving like that. I'm from Michigan. So again, we saw it here in the last number of decades in Detroit. People moved from the city out to the suburbs and built out the suburbs. And then a lot of them left the state over the last few decades, especially the last 15 years. So there's a real brain drain that can happen at a country level. So that's something that, the average person, like we were saying earlier, you were mentioning, like people put their heads in the sand. That's why it's so important to not have your head in the sand and have people awake around you, because then you got the smart people leaving. They're like, I'm out of here. So man, that is wild. How did you like, or you know what? I was gonna ask you too, this other thing. Do you think we get back to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution? Do you think Bitcoin helps us get back to those founding principles? What are your thoughts in that realm?
Oh, absolutely. I think freedom and Bitcoin are so well aligned that I'm hopeful that we could get back to that and those principles, and because I truly feel like there's nothing, there's no other country that can outdo those principles that the US was founded on. But I do feel like Bitcoin can bring us back to that and truly educate people on the value of freedom, the value of the individual, the value of just not being told what to do and being ruled by rulers, and really just putting yourself first.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. Would Speaking of the United States a bunch, we're just in Canada for the Canadian Bitcoin conference. What did you think of? Was that you had been to? Well, no, you were at the conference last year, but that was in Toronto. What was that your first time in Montreal, or what do you think of Montreal? What do you think of the conference?
No, I thought the conference was amazing. It was my second time in Montreal, but I was much younger when I went the first
Oh,
time,
okay.
so this was my first time going, experiencing it like as an adult. I love Montreal. Oh my
Same.
gosh, it's beautiful. The food is incredible.
Yes.
I It was 70 degrees at the
Yeah.
end of May. It was wonderful. No, I loved it. I thought the conference was amazing. They do an incredible job there.
They do. They set the standard in large part for the venue. I mean, that venue was for conferences.
Yeah,
Dang. Yeah,
it
that
was
was so cool.
awesome.
Man, that was cool.
Yeah,
And
it
you're right.
really
That was the
was.
first time. Yeah, that was the first time I had been there as an adult too, and it was man, it was unbelievable. The food, like you said, the weather there, it was incredible. People are super friendly too.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really expect.
Yes,
I
yes.
didn't know. I think
Mhm.
Quebec City might be a little crazier. It might be a little bit more hey, you guys speak English here, which Quebec City actually I haven't been there in 20 years, but that was a great city too though. But anyway, that was a great talk. Again, I saw your talk. I didn't get to see you, like I was saying. We didn't get to see each other there because all my kids were running around the whole time. But you had a great talk there, which people should go check out on the. I don't know if Simply Bitcoin was streaming it or the Canadian Bitcoin conference, but again, the live stream there, you guys gave a great talk about
Yeah,
people leaving the country, which is a great panel to have you on, obviously. So that was really good. Do,
thank
do you
you. And
think?
yeah, no, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to transition.
No, I was gonna say, I love Montreal so much. Like all I could say was, how can you let the commies end up
I
with
know.
this beautiful country? I mean, it's just that was my biggest thing. You can't let the commies end up with this amazing country.
I know it's so beautiful there. It's again, this is a whole different rabbit hole. We could talk about some other day, probably offline because it would probably just get taken down. But there's numerous different
Yeah,
books or things I'd read over the last that were from like decades ago that basically say that Canada is a petri dish for the British Crown, and they would just basically go try things in Canada and see like, okay, if it worked there, we'll go try it in other places in America. Like,
yeah.
great. So we won't go down that rabbit hole today. Uh, but that's yeah, it's but unbelievable. I mean, the people there are just so I love Canadians. They're so nice. They're too nice. I mean, that is the problem in
I
a way.
know.
They're too nice, and that's the problem. So anyway, in saying some of those things, do you think? And this is something I try to ask people, and I just think it's an important thing, a foundational thing. But do you think that when societies are breaking, do you think it's because people lose God or humility? Like if someone doesn't believe in God, I think you can probably say humility, ultimate humility. We talked about the saints earlier, picking up your cross and laying down your life. And do you think it's, God or humility going first and then that leads to broken money and then you can just see things to really start spiraling? Or do you think it's opposite? Do you think the money goes and then that's what leads to people, decadence or whatever and lack of humility and that? How do you see things when you kind of frame society and just kind of seeing the patterns? Like how do you look at that?
I think it kind of happens simultaneously because I mean it's extremely clear that they're trying to remove, you know, God from, obviously they did it from schools. Um,
Yep.
People see religion kind of like as just a quack. Um,
Yes.
And I really think that it happens simultaneously just because like I'm seeing both happen at the same time. People don't um like the obviously the money's broken. People are straying away from God. They aren't I mean, they're just basically entrusting their children's lives in the hands of people who don't even know that there's only two genders, and just completely mixing up what is right at the end of the day. I mean, I would send my kid to school so that they can learn math, not so you can tell them what gender they are. But yeah, I really think it's both at the same time.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to, yeah, I mean, really argue with you there. I mean, it does seem like it keeps happening simultaneously. I, the other day I was talking to somebody about just, you know, Bitcoin being a bar fight in a way where like people, for whatever reason, like, you know, Bitcoiners, they tend to, again, the patterns, they see them quicker. They realize they're in a fight much quicker than the average person. And the average person like has to get hit like 10 times or they're laying on the floor. And then they realize like, oh, school's not actually teaching my kids things. like,
Yeah.
like we didn't see that 20 years ago. So we mentioned that too, like the importance of the family and the nuclear family. And it seems like, again, any NGO or these organizations are hell bent on destroying that. What is your, you know, thought on just the importance of the family and that unit, that structure that really seems to be the underpinning of society? I mean, how do you see that being some type of foundational piece of society?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like if like you said, they're hell bent on destroying it, then it must be something that's pretty powerful if they're so focused on, saying that it's wrong or, that's not right. Women who stay at home and want to have children, they should be ostracized for that. They should be looked down for that. I really feel like if they're so hard pressed on getting rid of it and saying that it's bad, that most likely that it's something that is to be reckoned with for sure. I know that whenever I would say things like being a mother and a wife are the two most important jobs that I'll ever undertake, I was really scrutinized for that because I would have
Mm-hmm.
people be like, "Oh, but they fought so hard for our rights and for us to go to work." And I'm like, "Well, you do realize when you go to work, you pay more taxes for that, right?" So, and you're outsourcing your children to other people when you could be at home teaching them and implementing the same values that you find important as well. So, um, I feel like that it's just so important to have the nuclear family and just to like why would I want someone else to teach my children when I could do that for them? And then they would end up having a stronger relationship with someone else when they're a part of me. So that's just wild to me.
Yeah, boy, I hesitate a little bit to say my thoughts on it. I've only said it in private for a little while now. Maybe I'll tell you offline. But it's I'm trying to think of how to say it. I think of, I'll say this for now. I think of the Garden of Eden a lot. I think of the serpent coming to Eve first, and it makes me think of a lot of today. And people can maybe read between the lines, but again, it's having humility and understanding both genders have their pros and both genders have their cons, and that's kind of how
Yep.
life goes. And it's people not, to me at least, not being able to humble themselves to that and saying, hey, this is my role in life. This is what I'm supposed to do, and in embracing that, and then letting the Noel Hararis and the Bill Gates of the world and letting whoever influence them and think, yeah, you know what? I am ticked off. I should be doing something else. That to me is like one of the greatest psyops of all time. And I just think we're in the middle of it, or maybe middle towards the end, but I don't know. Does that seem way off base to you? Or it feels like it's just like we're being completely played and the money's just like a part of it. That's just one little faction of it.
Totally. No, I completely agree. And I mean, we all know the cycle. Strong men create good times creates weak men create hard
Yeah, I love
times.
that.
So that's just the cycle of it. And I mean, truly, I think, the men should, step up
Right.
and,
Yeah, the men are
you
very
know,
responsible for what's going on. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's just, time for the strong men to step up again.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And it's women being able to recognize that, right? Men doing it, have the
Yeah.
cojones to do it, so that women trust them to then say, "Oh,
Yep.
wow, okay, great." Because I mean, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg thing a little bit. Like it's hard to
Yeah.
tell what comes first. I mean, I tend to think it's probably men screwed up first, and then it gives it an avenue, a door to women to say, "Well, hey, like you're not doing your job, then why am I doing my job?" So it's again, it's a whole nother rabbit hole, but it's something that again is so taboo to talk about in society and that's the thing I can't stand is just like band-aids on bullet holes. I cannot stand it. I've thought about renaming the podcast even like certain times like band-aids on bullet holes because it's constantly like there's an oil spill up the river and at the factory, and then we're just down here 10 miles down river like with nets trying to like siphon out the oil instead of like just going to the factory and cleaning up the mess and fixing
Yeah.
the problems. Boy, oh boy.
Yep.
Anyway, um, what do you think the importance of, again, we talked about homeschooling a little bit and just seeing that, but the importance that like your education, your whether it was your mother homeschooling, how do you think that enabled you to just even lower your time preference and to see things differently? And I'll say this, but I preface it a little bit because I feel like the Bitcoin world a little is we're kind of conflicted. I see a lot of people and we're human and we all have it to a degree of like high time preference of like, when's it going to 100,000? When's it going to 1,000,000? And that's like half, well, more than half of the content you see. I personally can't stand it. And I'll plant my flag in the ground there. Like to me, it's about the kids educating people, but it's like, well, it's going to take 15 years, Brandon, like a generation it's like, yeah, no shit. Like let's do this the right way instead of we need to get a sovereign wealth fund in. What do you think, whether it's education, the importance of educating the youth and building up this foundation and bottom up adoption versus the sovereign wealth funds, the El Salvador's making Bitcoin legal tender? Like how do you see like the ranking of importance in a way of like, is it better for legal tender status to be done, or is it better for the kids, I guess, or not better per se, but how do you see, I guess, that stack coming together?
Yeah. I think educating the kids is so important because that's what's going to create the longevity of it actually sticking. But I feel like it's not just about educating the kids anymore. It's about educating like people my age,
Yeah.
people boomers, because I mean, boomers are the ones with money. So educating them is so important. Um, but I feel like education is the base of it because if people don't know why it's important or how it plays a role or how it's the solution, then they're not going to understand why they need it. So I feel like educating not just kids but just education in and of itself is the solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's like I know George Gammon always talks about this a ton. He's like, well, him and Jeff Booth obviously been going back and forth together for the last year or whatever it is. And he's like, we agree on everything except like you just believe that Bitcoin is going to change people more than I do. And I would say we were probably both on Jeff Booth's side a little more. Like it will change human behavior, it's changed all of our behavior. I do think George, though, to this point, though, is right in the sense of like 100 years from now, where if people are alive that didn't experience what we went through in the last 5 years, last 10, last 20 years, then you do have, like you said, this cycle of, hard men creating good times. You have this cycle again, this forward turning
Yeah.
again 100 years from now, where it's like, well, things are pretty good. We got nuclear reactors going, and everyone's got cheap and abundant energy. It's like we can start messing around a little bit. So I think like the education part, there's both sides are right, and that's like this genius zone of like understanding that both sides are right. We have to do both ways. So anyway, I think that's again another fascinating discussion to people need to continue having. I think you nailed it there. What I know we're getting toward the end here. What do you what's your guys at Plan B? What are your guys like? Do you have? Is it something where you guys might foray into more education for older, younger people, stuff like that? Like, what is your guys' long-term vision even for Plan B, and like where you guys are going to grow it and what your guys' plans are for it?
Yeah, so lately we've been trying to emphasize on not just flag theory, but community in general and how important that is. You know, not being alone and having this support group and how important it is. But also educating people on, you know, the sovereign individual thesis of governments should compete for you and the fruits of your labor,
Yeah.
and that you're not limited to, if you're in a kind of sucky situation, that you have options, but not just that, but that, you know, you have the power of change, um, and kind of like how Bitcoin is that power source in a sense, because money talks. So if you're choosing to move your money elsewhere because where you are isn't serving you the best, then you have that option.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool. I love that. I can't wait to see where you guys keep taking Plan B, because you guys, two super based ladies running the organization. It's like, it's the best. I just love every time I see you guys tweets or
You.
like you guys on stage. It's just like, it's like one of those things where like, okay, gotta watch and see what the ladies are saying. It's just, I love it.
Thank you.
Oh, so good. All right, we'll do a little lightning round, a little segment, new segment presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, talking about Bitcoin education, educating the youth, things of that nature. And it's a little lightning round. So I'll go through, like, I don't know if there's 21. I don't know if I have 21 on here, maybe 15, 18, 20, little, one word basically or something like that. And you can give your lightning round, like one word answer. It could be a couple words, but whatever comes to your mind as we go through this list. And we'll kind of wrap here in a couple minutes.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Satoshi Nakamoto.
Genius.
That is the most common answer that I get in this game. The first one every time. Elon Musk.
Undecided.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, that's another whole rabbit hole we go down too, by the way. World Economic Forum.
Evil.
Passports.
Freedom. For
Anthony
now.
Fauci.
Oh my gosh. Rat.
Faith.
Bliss.
Altcoins.
Distractions.
Oh, nice. Cypherpunks.
Saints.
Community.
Gold.
Women in Bitcoin.
Important. Did you lose me?
Oh yeah, I might have lost you. Women in Bitcoin.
Valuable.
Men in Bitcoin.
Necessary.
Oh man, those are first. I love that. Katie the Russian.
My best friend.
Love that. Proof of work.
What's the right word I'm looking for? Necessary again. It's
Yep.
a way of life.
Oh, I like that. Beta males.
We need to get rid of those.
Oh man. Nuclear family.
Again, necessary. Need to bring it back.
Here's pick one of these: sports, art, or music.
Music.
Interesting. Bitcoin trading cards.
Love it.
And plan B passports.
Educating everybody.
I love it. I love it. Well, you passed. You passed. So
Fantastic.
there's your schooling for the day. Where can people
Yeah.
find you, Jessica?
So on Twitter, I'm at Jessica HODLr. My email is jessica@planbpassport. You can check out our website, planbpassport.com.
Love it. Love it. Unless you have any last parting shots or anything, I appreciate you for coming on and being a playable character. And most importantly, just throwing out based content all the time, because it is very refreshing to see. And courage is contagious. So I think that's where you touched on this earlier too. It's so important for people to stand up, men first, to be standing up and speaking their mind, using their God-given testosterone to do what they should be doing. And but it's contagious. So thank you for doing what you do.
No, thank you so much. And thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows, of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards, where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world, one collectible physical trading card at a time, by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.